fastest you've ever seen someone fail a marriage? Literally minutes. I was invited to a wedding. It was an absolutely beautiful event. Everyone in the wedding party literally looked as if they had stepped out of a magazine photo shoot. The groomsmen were all impeccably dressed, and the bridesmaids all looked divine. The bride's beautiful white gown was gorgeously fitted and ended in a cascade of beautiful lace that was just to die for. Everything was planned to the nth degree. Everything. The bride and groom exchanged their vows, and literally, within seconds of the "I now pronounce you man and wife," the door to the chapel flew open with a loud, explosive thud. It was so unexpected and startling that everyone turned to see what was happening. A woman walked through the door. She had wild eyes, the likes of which I had never seen before. They were big, bulging, red, and fixated on the bride and groom. When I say fixated, I mean it. It was as if we weren't even there. Her eyes were laser focused straight ahead. I should add that it was crystal clear that her eyes were red because she had been crying. Everyone looked at each other absolutely bewildered about why the woman would open the door so emphatically and why she looked like a wild animal ready to attack. The truth was that she looked like that because she was ready to attack. She was ready to attack, and as she lunged forward, the wedding ceremony erupted into chaos. The bride had an absolute look of bewilderment on her face, but the groom's expression showed panic and terror. Before anyone could react, the woman took off running down the aisle. Some of us stood up with worried expressions, but no one intervened. She flew up the steps where the bridal party stood with supernatural speed, and the next thing we saw was the groom crumbling to the floor as she delivered the hardest hit I've ever witnessed against his jaw. The preacher jumped back while the bride stood frozen. Everyone gasped in unison. As the groom dropped, this woman landed on him and began punching him relentlessly. After what seemed like eternity but was really just moments, 3 groomsmen tried pulling her off, but she wouldn't budge. She wrapped her legs around him and clung like a second skin. It took 6 men to finally pry this 5 feet 4 inches woman off the 6 feet 1 inch man. That should tell you something about her determination. When they finally contained her, she was crying and screaming, her voice echoing through the church as she demanded to know how he could do this to her. The bride, having composed herself, asked to speak with the woman. The guys kept a firm grip on her but let her sit on a church pew as her story unfolded. She was pregnant. She'd been involved with the groom for the past year, while the bride had been with him for 3 years. Neither woman knew about the other, but the groom certainly knew about both relationships. He had told this woman he'd be overseas for work for 3 weeks, when in reality he was getting married and going on his honeymoon. His plan might have worked if he hadn't made the fatal mistake of using a credit card the woman had access to for wedding transportation. She saw the charge, called the company, and discovered it was for a car to take the newlyweds from church to reception. She got the church address, and that's how she found him. She was 4 months pregnant, and he knew about the baby. He had been staying with her regularly, even though he had his own place, as he and the bride didn't live together full time. The groom, who had been taken to a back room, emerged as the woman was telling her story. He approached them and began yelling at her, calling her names and trying to shout over her to prevent her from exposing him further. We were all too shocked to intervene, but as he continued berating her, something snapped in the bride. Before anyone could stop her, she pulled back and punched him on the opposite side of his face. Her punch wasn't as powerful as the first woman's, but it was still impressive. Everyone jumped between them, and the groom's family pulled him outside. The woman apologized to the bride for ruining the wedding, but the bride hugged her and thanked her for coming, saying she would never have known the truth otherwise. Surprisingly, the rest of the evening turned out well. The bride decided to have the reception since it was already paid for. The woman joined us and was comforted by everyone. We discovered some members of the groom's family had known about her all along. Everyone went to the venue, talking about what we'd witnessed. The unfortunate part was that the bride and groom were already legally married. They had signed the marriage documents before the ceremony due to anticipated time constraints afterward. Though the documents hadn't been filed yet, the officials wouldn't return them since they had been properly signed and witnessed. Thankfully, the bride was able to get an annulment and resisted the groom's repeated attempts to reconcile. The other woman didn't take him back either, though she had the child, and they ended up co-parenting. It was the fastest marriage failure I've ever seen. It didn't even last through the ceremony. The bride later discovered even more women he'd been seeing as news of the incident spread. When I asked him how he thought he'd get away with such deception, his response was astonishing. I was actually just going to wing it and see how things went. I had a 50-50 shot that no one would find out, and I thought those were pretty good odds. He clearly thought wrong. I've often wondered how he planned to hide an entire child. Looking back, I suppose some relationships aren't meant to last. In our case, the warning signs were there from the beginning, but neither of us wanted to acknowledge them.